Sony just announced another price increase for PS5, and it's going into effect April 2nd. We talked about this possibility less than a year ago, and unfortunately, we were right. The hardware market has been a disaster, and those costs are getting passed directly to consumers. Here's what's changing. Standard PS5 goes from €549 to €649. That's a €100 increase. Digital PS5 goes from $499 to $599. PS5 Pro goes from $799 to $899. €900 for a console. That's not a typo, that's the actual price you'll pay for the premium version of Sony's hardware. These are massive increases. And while they were expected given the market situation, that doesn't make them any less painful. We're watching this generation get more and more expensive, while still waiting for it to actually deliver on its promises. It's a weird generation, one where we've talked more about price hikes than games will remember. Think about that for a second. In 10 years, when people look back at this console generation, what are they going to remember? The price increases. Not the incredible exclusive games. Not the revolutionary features. The constant escalating costs. That's depressing. And it's not just PlayStation. Xbox has raised prices. Nintendo will probably do the same eventually, if they haven't already. We're in this cycle where every year something gets more expensive, and consumers just have to absorb it. Meanwhile, we're already thinking about the next generation of consoles, because this one still hasn't fully kicked into gear. Which brings me to an uncomfortable prediction. The next generation is going to be brutal price-wise. Don't expect a PS6, or whatever Xbox calls their next console, to launch anywhere near affordable, €600 minimum. Probably 700 or 800. I wouldn't be shocked if 900 becomes the starting price. That's where we're headed. The PS5 Pro price today could be the base console price tomorrow. Sony's explanation is the international situation. Supply chain issues. Component costs. All true. But from the consumer perspective, it's just another price increase in an endless series of price increases. Services cost more. Hardware costs more. Games cost more. Everything keeps getting more expensive, and wages sure as hell aren't keeping pace. I'm curious how this gets received. Not just the immediate reaction, but whether people actually pay these prices. Because $649 for a standard PS5 or $50.99 for digital is significant money. We're approaching €1,000 for premium hardware. Gradually, but inevitably. And these increases have to be gradual, because if Sony just jumped straight to €1,000 console, people would revolt. But add 100 here, 100 there, and eventually you get to the same place. Interestingly, we got off easier than America. Their PS5 Pro went from $699 to $899. That's a $200 increase. We only got hit with €100. Still terrible, but comparatively less terrible. Which is a weird thing to be grateful for, but here we are. The real problem is timing. We're not in an economic boom where everyone has disposable income. We're in the opposite situation. Essential goods are getting more expensive. Housing is getting more expensive. Everything is more expensive. And now non-essential things like gaming are also getting more expensive. At some point, people have to make choices about what they can actually afford. But here's what I think is really happening behind the scenes. Sony isn't just raising prices because of component costs. They're trying to recover from their catastrophic live service strategy. Think about all the money they poured into that. All the games they greenlit. All the studios they acquired or funded. And what do they have to show for it? Concord lasted 2 weeks before getting pulled offline, and the studio shut down. That's a complete write-off. Whatever they spent on development, marketing, everything, gone. And that wasn't the only live service project they had cooking. They announced 12 of these things. 12. How many survived? How many are actually making money? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Sony bet huge on live service gaming and lost spectacularly. So where does that money come from? Console sales. Hardware margins. Squeezing more revenue out of the install base because the live service gold rush didn't pan out the way they expected. I'm not saying this is the only reason for price increases, but I'd bet it's a factor. You don't just absorb losses that size, you find ways to make up for them. And here's the thing. PlayStation isn't what it used to be, not even close. Look at what's coming. What's actually exciting on the horizon? Saurus. That's it. That's the one game I'm genuinely interested in from Sony's lineup. A roguelite from the Returnal team that looks like it could be great. Everything else, either years away or just not that compelling. Where are the big exclusive single-player experiences Sony built their reputation on? The games that made PlayStation the default choice for people who wanted incredible story-driven adventures. They're not here. They've been replaced by live service attempts that mostly failed, and a general sense that Sony has lost the plot on what made them special in the first place. And I think these price increases are connected to another strategy shift, keeping games off PC. For years, Sony has been porting their exclusives to PC eventually. Horizon, God of War, Spider-Man, all of them ended up on Steam. But I think they're reconsidering that approach. Because if you're raising console prices this high, you need to justify the purchase. You need exclusive content that actually stays exclusive. So the calculation becomes this: raise hardware prices, keep more games, PlayStation only, force people who want those experiences to buy the expensive console, recoup live service losses through hardware sales, and maintaining a walled garden, instead of opening up to PC, where margins are different and you're competing with Steam. It makes business sense from Sony's perspective. But it's terrible for players. You're paying more for hardware, and getting less flexibility about where you can play games. The consumer is getting squeezed from both directions: higher prices and more restricted access. And the frustrating part is, we can't even vote with our wallets effectively, because Sony knows a significant portion of their audience will pay whatever they charge. There are people who will buy a PS5 Pro at €900 because they want the best PlayStation experience. There are people who will accept these prices because they're invested in the ecosystem. Their friends are on PlayStation. Their game library is on PlayStation. They're not going to jump to PC or Xbox just because Sony raised prices again. Sony is banking on that inertia. On the fact that once you're in an ecosystem, it's hard to leave, even when you're getting price gouged. And they're probably right. These price increases will generate complaints, but most people will eventually pay them, because what's the alternative? Not play the games you want to play. Switch to a different platform, and lose your library and friends. This is the problem with console ecosystems. Once they have you, they can incrementally make things worse, and you'll accept it, because leaving is too expensive, and too much of a hassle. It's a form of lock-in that benefits the platform holder at the expense of the consumer. And looking ahead, it only gets worse. If this is the pricing for the PS5 generation, what does the PS6 generation look like? Are we really going to accept €1,000 consoles as normal? €1,500 premium versions. At what point does it become so expensive that the market actually pushes back? I don't have good answers to these questions. What I know is, we're in a cycle where everything gets more expensive, and the value proposition gets worse. PlayStation used to be about incredible exclusive games that you couldn't play anywhere else. Now it's about expensive hardware, with fewer compelling exclusives, and a company that's clearly trying to find new revenue streams after betting big on live service and losing. Saurus looks great. I'm excited for that. But one game doesn't make a generation. One game doesn't justify €900 hardware. One game doesn't make up for years of mismanagement and failed strategies that are now being paid for by consumers through constant price increases. Sony can explain these increases however they want. International situation, component costs, market conditions, all technically true. But the reality is, they made bad bets on live service gaming, lost a ton of money, and are now extracting that money from their install base through higher hardware prices and potentially more restrictive release strategies for their games. This won't be the last price increase we see. It won't even be the last one this year, probably. We're in a period where everything keeps getting more expensive, and the companies making these products will keep pushing prices higher as long as people keep paying them. And most people will keep paying them because they don't have realistic alternatives. So what do you do as a consumer? Wait for sales, I guess? Buy used. Skip the premium hardware and stick with the base model, or just accept that gaming as a hobby is getting significantly more expensive, and budget accordingly. None of these are great options, but those are the choices we have. PlayStation isn't what it used to be. the value isn't there anymore. The exclusive games that justified the platform are fewer and farther between. The prices keep climbing. The strategies keep shifting in ways that benefit Sony, but not players. And we're supposed to just accept it, because that's how the market works now. I'm curious what you think about all this. Are you still buying PlayStation hardware at these prices? Are you waiting? Switching platforms? Let me know, because I want to understand how people are actually responding to these increases, beyond just complaining online. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.